Listening Test 5. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer the questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer all your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear John and Joan talking about their new school. Look at questions 1 to 5 on the form now. You will see that there is an example which has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be repeated.
Hi, John. How's it going?
Pretty good. What about you?
Terrific. So what do you think of our new school?
A1, man. Much better than the old one. In fact, I'm going to write an article for the London Times about it.
Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. First, you have another chance to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi, John. How's it going?
Pretty good. What about you?
Terrific. So what do you think of our new school?
A1, man. Much better than the old one. In fact, I'm going to write an article for the London Times about it.
Really?
Yeah. Have you got half an hour? Maybe you should give me some ideas.
If you buy me a coffee.
No problem. How do you think I should start? Introduce the headmaster?
Why don't you compare it with the old one? You know, the buildings, laboratories, language lab, computer equipment, fitness center, pool, stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I mean, the old one was pretty bad, and the new headmaster seems like a great guy. Actually, all the teachers I've met seem pretty decent.
Same here. The French teacher is really cool, and he's actually French, not like Smith at the old place. He sounded less French than even you do.
Hey, my accent is perfect.
Dream on. But why don't you start with what the headmaster told us school this morning, you know, his ideas on education and things.
Yeah, I liked that. None of that stuff about how we must study hard for our futures in the honor of the school. There's no free lunch, that type of thing. He sounds pretty progressive. What did he say? If we teachers succeed in stimulating your minds, stimulating you to ask questions and think critically, then you will discover the joy of learning, enjoy your studies, and therefore work hard.
Hey, what a memory. Those are his exact words. Do you remember what he said next?
Something about it's good to keep fit.
Yeah. Do you remember him mentioning those experiments showing that after half an hour of exercise, our brains are much more creative for hours?
And puts you in a better mood. Did you see the fitness center?
Look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen to more of the conversation between John and Joan and answer questions 6 to 10.
I went early this morning for a workout. Fantastic. Olympic-sized pool, not like that tiny 25-meter thing we had before. And the gym has absolutely everything. I counted 10 exercise bikes, some rowing machines, really good ones. Are you gonna go?
I've been every other day for 2 weeks. Feel great. Hey, maybe I should interview some of the teachers and students for my article.
Of course you should. Wow, just thought of it. I'm doing a video project. Maybe I could film the interviews.
Makes sense. And I could take a few photos. Maybe the newspaper would use 1 or 2 of them. The main hall is awesome. Really light, lots of windows, and a huge stage, big enough for a 60 or 70 person orchestra.
Did you see Mr. Clark, the old music teacher? I think he's the only teacher here from the old school.
He is, and he was the only decent teacher. I met him in the hall. He's really happy, planning to double the size of the school orchestra. It's great.
Okay, let's plan what we're going to do.
That is the end of section 1. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You are going to hear an introduction to some London parks. First look at questions 11 to 15. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the London Parks Society. It's a lovely day, so in half an hour or so we'll go outside and start our tour of some of London's famous royal parks. But for the next half an hour or so, while we enjoy our coffee and biscuits, I'll tell you something about some of these wonderful parks, a brief history, and some of their special attractions. I also have a few slides to show you. First, what do we mean by Royal Park? In short, they once belonged to or were established by order of a king or queen of England, or at least a member of the royal family. And it's a good job they did. They provide quiet and natural scenery, places that we might not be able to enjoy today if our former rulers had just put buildings everywhere. Let's start with the most famous, Hyde Park. This park offers some of London's finest scenery and covers 630 acres and a perimeter of 4 miles. I know we have friends from France here, so I'd better give it in metric. That's about 260 hectares and 6.5 kilometres. Hyde Park dates back to 1536, when King Henry VIII got the land from the monks of Westminster Abbey. Much of the later design, its layout, was done by the architect Decimus Burton in the 1820s, who took full advantage of the area's high and low land. It was the original site of the Crystal Palace, built for the Great Exhibition of 1851, the original ancestor of today's World Expos, like the one that will be held in Shanghai in 2010, I think. So it's been popular for a long time, and not only the people who live and work near the park like it. Many famous rock bands like Pink Floyd and the Rolling Stones have put on big rock concerts here. I still remember the Rolling Stones concert there in, I forget the exact year. It was around 1968, when I was a university student.
Now look at questions 16 to 20. As the talk continues, answer questions 16 to 20.
I mentioned the architect Decimus Burton. He designed the very impressive grand entrance to the park. The whole front is about 107 feet long. Look at the 4 magnificent pillars that support the central entrance, and that carving on the wall. Here's a close-up of a naval and military procession, and the gates made of iron and bronze with a beautiful Greek-style flower design. One of the most popular sites in the park is Speaker's Corner, in the northeast corner, where you can hear British people exercise their right to free speech. There may be a dozen or more at any one time, each standing on a soapbox and spouting, usually, controversial views on any topic you can think of: religion, politics, fox hunting, trade unions, Europe, tourists, etc. Lots of arguing. It's great fun. And south of the Serpentine Lake is the memorial to Diana, Princess of Wales. It's an oval stone fountain that opened on July the 6th, 2004. Another memorial, in the southeast corner of the park, is the Albert Memorial, Queen Victoria's monument to her husband of that name. I see that time is getting short, so I'll be a bit briefer with the other parks that we'll see today and tomorrow. Regent's Park. It has a fantastic landscape and is known as the jewel in the crown. Regent's Park covers 487 acres. That's 197 hectares, including Primrose Hill, and has the largest outdoor sports area in London. Rugby, basketball, soccer, netball, cricket, it's all here. St James's Park, with its royal, political and literary associations, is at the very heart of London. It's overlooked by not one but 3 royal palaces. The most ancient palace is Westminster, now known as the Houses of Parliament. Then there's St James's Palace, which used to be the King or Queen's residence, despite the fact that the monarch has lived in the 3rd palace, Buckingham Palace, since 1837. There's so much to see in or by St James's Park. Bands give concerts twice a day in the park at weekends during the summer. And tomorrow is Saturday, so we're in luck. Then there's the changing of the guards. The Queen's Lifeguard changes daily at Whitehall, just nearby, Monday to Saturday at 11 a.m, an hour earlier on Sundays, and at Buckingham Palace every day at 11:30 in April, May and June, and on alternate days in July and March, if the weather is okay. Finally, we'll visit Greenwich Park, which is the oldest enclosed royal park. It's situated on a hilltop, with impressive views over the River Thames to the Docklands and the City of London. It contains several historic buildings, including the Old Royal Observatory, the Royal Naval College, the National Maritime Museum and the Queen's House. Well, it's time to go. A 10-minute walk and we'll be at Hyde Park.
That is the end of section 2. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You are going to hear Bob asking 3 other students some questions for a survey. First, listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 21 to 25. You now have some time to read questions 21 to 25.
Hi guys, I'm Bob. Have you got a few minutes?
Sure, but what's up?
Nothing much, but I've got to do a survey for my sociology class. It'd be great if you could help me out. You're students here, aren't you? Seen you around campus.
Yeah, economics majors. I'm Jed.
I'm Sue.
And I'm Anne.
Hi. Economics. I haven't made my mind up yet. It's a toss-up between sociology and environmental studies, resource management, sustainable development, that sort of thing.
Sure, but I have a class in 10 minutes. How long will it take?
Well, if I start with you, I should be able to get the info I need in 5 minutes or so.
Okay. What do you want to know? Names and stuff.
Anonymous is okay. I just need your major, economics, and what year you are.
We're all sophomores. The fun year.
Yeah, me too. Anyway, the first thing I want to know... By the way, these are open-ended questions. You can say as much or as little as you want.
Okay, fire away.
Right. What do you think is the single most important problem facing the world today?
I reckon it's global warming, not terrorism. I've been taking this environmental economics class, and it's really...
Come on, Sue. I've told you. This climate change stuff is all a big scare cooked up by environmental groups who care more about pandas than people. So subjective.
As the conversation continues, answer questions 26 to 30. You now have some time to read questions 26 to 30.
You're like a tape recorder. Why don't you learn what you're talking about?
Okay, guys, argue about it later. I just want to ask Sue a couple more questions so she can get to her class. What makes you think this, Sue?
Well, if you read about, just check on the internet. There's tons of information. But just look at the effects of rising temperatures on agriculture. For every degree rise in temperature above 30 degrees, there's something like a 10% drop in crop yields.
So that's your main reason for...
It's one of them. Sea levels could rise a meter or more by the end of the century. Think what that will mean for the billions of people who live in low-lying areas. And thousands of species could go extinct because they couldn't adapt quickly enough.
I told you, she cares more about pandas than people.
Jed, she mentioned all those billions of people in low places, and don't forget all the farmland that will be ruined by saltwater intrusion, replacing fresh underground water.
I've got to go. Why don't you see what Bob has to say? All he worries about is stock market trends. But we love you, Jed. Must go. See you.
Thanks. See you. So what's your major worry, Jed?
Sue kind of said it. It's a global economic slowdown, so people won't have jobs.
And what jobs will they have if food production drops like it could?
Maybe we should do this another time. Bye, guys.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You are going to hear a talk about Oxford and Cambridge universities. You now have some time to read questions 31 to 40.
Good evening, fellow members of the New York Memory Club. Tonight I'm going to talk about those two famous English universities, Oxford and Cambridge. Let's see who wins tonight's big memory prize, which is a barrel of real English beer. OK, here I go. Oxford is the oldest English-speaking university in the world. There is no clear date of when it started, but records show that there was some teaching at Oxford in 1096 AD. And it developed rapidly from 1167, when King Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. In 1188, a historian gave a public lecture to the top Oxford teachers, and in 1190, the first known overseas student arrived. This started the university's tradition of international exchanges. In 1231, the masters, meaning the teachers, were recognized as a universitas, which is Latin for something like a corporation. In the 13th century, conflict between town and gown meaning ordinary townspeople and students, the students wore gowns, accelerated the establishment of halls of residence like dormitories. This led to the Oxford colleges, of which University, Balliol and Merton colleges, established between 1249 and 1264, are the oldest. Less than a century later, Oxford was the most famous centre of learning in the world. It soon became a centre for religious and political disputes. John Wycliffe, a 14th century master of Balliol College, campaigned for a Bible in common English. The pro-Latin leaders of the Catholic Church in Rome were very angry over this, and even more angry when, in 1530, King Henry VIII forced Oxford University to accept his divorce from Catherine of Aragon. In the late 17th century, the Oxford philosopher John Locke, suspected of treason, was forced to leave England. The 18th century was an age of scientific discovery and religious revival. For example, a geometry professor at Oxford, Edmund Halley, successfully predicted the return of the comet that was named after him. I don't have enough time to tell you much more about Oxford University, but I must tell you that from 1878, academic halls were established for women. Since 1974, only one of Oxford's 39 colleges has not accepted both men and women. St Hilda's College remains the only women's college. Now for a few numbers. The University of Oxford has over 17,000 students. A quarter of these students are from outside the UK, 5% from Asia, 8% from North America, 10% from other European countries, and a few from elsewhere. Oxford University currently has students from more than 130 countries. Over 5,600 students are engaged in postgraduate work. Of these, around 3,000 are working in the arts and humanities. Going back to the colleges, of which there are 39, there are also 7 permanent private halls, which were founded by different Christian denominations, and which still retain their religious character. 30 colleges and all 7 halls admit students for both undergraduate and graduate degrees. 7 other colleges are for graduates only. 1, All Souls, has fellows only, and 1, Kellogg College, specialises in part-time graduate and continuing education. OK, that's enough for Oxford. Now I'll tell you something about Cambridge University. The town itself has its origins in the 1st century BC, when an Iron Age tribe established a settlement on Castle Hill. Later, the Romans took over this site, which was an important strategic point, and was the meeting point of several important Roman roads. Over 1,000 years later, the Normans from France built a castle here. All that remains of this castle nowadays is the small hill that was inside the castle walls. In the 12th century, students attended schools attached to the monasteries and cathedrals, and as universities developed in Italy and France, scholars moved from one centre to another. Some went from Paris to Oxford, and later, in the 13th century, groups arrived in Cambridge. By the middle of the 12th century, there were enough students there for the town to be officially recognised as a seat of learning. In fact, in 1231, King Henry III wrote out orders on how academic life in the town was to be managed. At this time, students had to make their own arrangements for living accommodation. Because it was difficult to find a decent place to live, hostels, like simple small hotels, were set up for them, and from these the college system evolved. The first college was Peterhouse, founded by a bishop, the Bishop of Ely. Just like in Oxford, as the university grew and took over more of the town, there were outbreaks of trouble between town and gown. Well, my time is nearly up, so I'll fast forward to the late 1800s, when 2 colleges were founded for women, but it was not until the late 1940s that they were awarded degrees. A 3rd women's college was founded in the 1950s, but it was not until the 1970s that other colleges began to accept female students.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.